an hour of his death, the first civil strife begins. And the first doctrine that till today has destroyed the Muslim mindset is included in defiance of what Muhammad or the Quran had said, which is that God has chosen Arabs to rule over the rest of the world. Not just any Arab, but the Arabs of Mecca. Not just the Arabs of Mecca, but the Arabs of Mecca who belong to the Quraysh tribe. Not just anyone of the Quraysh tribe, but the subclan of Hashemites. This at a time when the majority of the Muslim community in Arabia is not from there. They are converts, they are Persians, they are Africans, they are people from Medina, there's the Jews, the tribes in Medina. That entire edifice of Islam that denounced racism and ethnicity is turned on its head in the 14 hours that Muhammad's body was lying there and nobody was willing to bury him. He is perhaps the only Muslim who died that was not given the last rites to prayer. He was buried the exact place where he died, on his bed, because the house was surrounded and his family and his closest age, which was Ali, his cousin and his son-in-law, was not allowed to come out, because outside, and there's this great Marxist French writer who, Maxime Robinson, who says, the oil in the lamps of Medina had died down, but the hate and fighting between them had not. They were pulling each other's beards, they were trashing. There was one guy whose teeth were broken, another was killed, and they said, well, the genies took his body away. This may sound to many non-Muslims as very archaic and strange, but trust me, in the Muslim psyche, we refer to these incidents as if they happened yesterday. The tragedy is that this particular incident is completely absent from any Muslim narrative. What happened to the body of the Prophet Muhammad? If at all you accept that he is your greatest leader, then how did this happen? Unless Muslims address that issue, they can't come to the conclusion that something very evil happened that night. That practicing Muslims were slaughtered by other Muslims in the name of a doctrine that had no basis. The doctrine of apostasy came about. People were decapitated, practicing Muslims, companions of the Prophet. Their wives were raped in public as punishment. And within 40 years, by the year 665, the people who had opposed Islam throughout became the first dynasty of Islam. Now, because Muslims are averse to doing critical thinking about history, Muslims study history as if it is theology. Therefore, to study history as if it is a divine truth, you lose the ability to critique it. Because suddenly you are confronted with the idea that if I studied this, I might be offending someone or committing a sin. And from that time onward, every dynasty in Islam, coming down from that first one, the Umayyads, to 1924, when the last of the caliphates, which was the Ottomans, was made illegal by Kemal Atatürk of Turkey, the Muslims have been told by the clergy and by the historians that your end goal is the establishment of a political Islamic state all over the universe. And at that time they thought the world was flat, which meant the known world. To this day, when imams come on at mosque and post the videos on the internet and say, "Oh God, defeat the Christians and Jews," but they say that in Arabic, so you won't understand. And then have the audacity to cultivate into the white guilt of liberal left Canadians and say, oh, we didn't mean you. We meant the defeat of the Christians and Jews are already dead. You don't worry about it. And as it is, you guys are not Christians and Jews. You shouldn't be worried. You're basically liberals and conservatives and NDP guys. The ability to lie as an act of piety has been sharpened to an excellence by the world Islamist movement. The Muslim Brotherhood has learned from my Communist Party colleagues of how to create fronts, how to develop organizations that are able to spread their fascism in the guise of accommodation and pluralism. Not even the communists managed that. I mean, if they'd managed that, there won't be such oppression in the communist world. But this is what has happened. So, going back to my book, I've addressed it in 3 different sections. I've studied the early dynasties. I've picked 4. The Umayyads of Damascus, the Abbasids of Iraq, Baghdad, the Andalusian Muslims, and the first few decades of Islam. And throughout this period of up to 1258, when the Mongols came and destroyed Baghdad, and it's very funny. It's sometimes hilarious. When the Americans went to Baghdad, what they had on the side was the Shias of Iraq, who worked through Washington and through the Iraqi National Congress, and we know all that you'll have no problems over there, don't worry about it. When the Mongols came to Baghdad, the Prime Minister of the Caliph was also Shia, and he too had a deal. Don't worry about that, it's going to work out fine. The massacres that happened in Baghdad in 1258, and the burning of books, and the slaughter is so immense that from 1258 till today, the Arabs have never had sovereignty over themselves since that year. It's been either Turks, it's been Europeans, and for a long time it has been either the Russians or the Americans, and now it is the Saudis. Well, that probably is the only time somebody is governing them. But the slaughter in Baghdad was to an extent that the Euphrates and Tigris had either black water, which was coming from the inks of the libraries, or red, which was coming from the blood of the Muslims. And within a generation, there were so many women who were Muslim who were taken as wives by the Mongols, that within a generation the Mongols had become Muslim. And therefore, the doctrine was again rehearsed that for any non-Arab Muslim to consider himself or herself to be equal to an Arab is a sin. That has governed the notion of supremacy within the Muslim world and the divisions that occur. So I've studied the earlier part, and then I've tried to analyze the 3 countries that claim to be Muslim countries. One is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the other is the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the third, which is my birthplace, which is the only country on earth that was created, other than Israel, in the name of a religion and from the partition of a British colony, which is fascinating. So we have on one side British Palestine, and on the other side we have British India. British Palestine, British India is divided on the demand by the Muslims to create a Muslim Holy Land. And the British say, okay. In British Palestine, the demand by the Jews to create a separate homeland is opposed by the same Muslims who are demanding that British India be divided on that religion. Both countries come about in the same year from the same colonial empire, except one is validated by the United Nations, the other doesn't need to because there is no contest. Nobody contests the creation of Pakistan except Afghanistan. But I won't go there, it gets murky. All 3 countries, from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, or Iran, have become failed states that can only be governed by oppressive